Agent Bruce Mao pressed play on the recording equipment. December 12, 1989, 3:47 p.m. What came through the speakers wasn't what 2 years and $3 million were supposed to capture. No coded language, no whispered conspiracies, just John Gotti, clear as daylight, explaining exactly how power worked when everyone was listening. The FBI had expected to record a criminal. Instead, they documented something far more dangerous, a masterclass in influence that would reshape everything law enforcement thought they understood about organized crime. The Ravenite Social Club occupied 247 Mulberry Street in Little Italy. Red brick facade, narrow windows with heavy curtains, unmarked door painted forest green. From the outside, nothing suggested it housed the operational center of America's most powerful crime family. The building sat between a bakery that had operated since 1923 and a restaurant that served the same families for 3 generations. Neighborhood residents walked past daily without a second glance. But every weekday at precisely 4 p.m., a midnight blue Lincoln Town car with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. John Gotti stepped out, straightened his $2,000 Brioni suit, adjusted his silk tie, and walked through that unmarked door like he owned not just the building, but the entire neighborhood and everyone in it. Because he did. The year was 1989. Reagan's America was ending, replaced by Bush's promises of change. The Cold War was dissolving as walls crumbled across Europe. Wall Street was booming while inner cities struggled. Cable television was expanding, creating new forms of celebrity and instant communication. In this environment of rapid change, traditional organized crime faced a fundamental choice: adapt to the new reality or disappear into history. Most crime families chose adaptation through enhanced invisibility, lower profiles, quieter operations, less public interaction. The Lucchese family retreated into construction. The Colombo family focused on neighborhood rackets. The Genovese family perfected appearing leaderless. John Gotti chose the opposite strategy. He chose to become impossible to ignore. The Gambino family, under Paul Castellano, had operated like a traditional corporation, strict hierarchy with clear reporting structures. Castellano rarely appeared in public. He conducted business through intermediaries. He maintained distance between personal life and street operations. It was a model built for an earlier era when federal surveillance required physical presence and media attention could be managed. Gotti understood that era was over. Technology had changed everything. When he orchestrated Castellano's assassination outside Sparks Steakhouse in December 1985, he wasn't just eliminating a rival. He was implementing a completely different theory of power. Where Castellano had hidden, Gotti would be visible. Where Castellano had whispered, Gotti would speak clearly. Where Castellano had avoided attention, Gotti would court it. The strategy was counterintuitive, dangerous, and for 7 years it worked. By 1987, John Gotti had become the most recognizable organized crime figure in America. His face appeared on magazine covers. Television cameras followed his court appearances. Newspapers detailed his acquittals. The nickname Teflon Don suggested charges wouldn't stick. But the real power wasn't in avoiding conviction. It was in controlling the narrative around every attempt. Each trial became theater. Each acquittal became legend. Each public appearance reinforced the image of a man untouchable by the system designed to contain him. This wasn't accidental. It was calculated. Gotti had recognized something that federal prosecutors hadn't. In the media age, perception was power. And power openly displayed created its own protection. The Ravenite Club became the stage for this performance. Every afternoon Gotti held court, not hidden meetings with hushed conversations, open audiences where anyone could observe. Business was conducted in full view of the street. Decisions were made loudly enough for surveillance equipment to capture every word. It seemed insane. It was strategic genius. The FBI installed sophisticated listening devices throughout the Ravenite building. Microphones in walls, transmitters in fixtures, recording equipment across the street, cameras positioned in surrounding apartments rented using false identities. Agents posed as construction workers, street vendors, tourists photographing Little Italy. Operation Alpha consumed unprecedented resources, $3 million in equipment and operations. 47 full-time agents working shifts, 24-hour surveillance requiring coordination between multiple offices, 2 years of monitoring that generated over 600 hours of recorded conversations. The technical challenges were extraordinary. Traditional surveillance relied on brief private meetings. Gotti conducted business in the same location daily, for hours, with dozens present. The team documented every conversation, identified every visitor, maintained continuous coverage without detection. What they captured confounded everyone. Gotti didn't speak in code. He used names, dates, specific amounts. He discussed family business like a CEO presenting quarterly results. When questions arose about loyalty, he addressed them directly. When disputes needed resolution, he mediated openly. When discipline was required, he explained his reasoning step by step. The recordings revealed something unprecedented, a crime boss operating without the traditional mechanisms of concealment. No euphemisms, no layers of deniability, no protection through ignorance, just clear, direct management of a complex organization. But the most revealing conversations weren't about crime. They were about power itself, how it was acquired, how it was maintained, how it was projected. Gotti understood that in the television age, influence wasn't built through fear alone. It required respect, and respect came not from being mysterious, but from being consistently, visibly effective. Enter Salvatore Gravano. Sammy, the Bull Gravano, had been Gotti's underboss since 1986. Short, stocky, soft-spoken. Where Gotti was theatrical, Gravano was practical. Where Gotti courted attention, Gravano preferred shadows. But he was Gotti's most trusted lieutenant, the man who made the flashy strategies work through careful, quiet execution. The surveillance tapes captured hours of Gotti-Gravano conversations, planning sessions, strategy discussions, personal exchanges. What emerged was a partnership between two completely different approaches to power. Gotti provided the public face. Gravano provided the private machinery. Together they had created something unique in organized crime history, a fully visible operation that somehow remained untouchable until it wasn't. The problem with visible power is that everyone can see it work, including the systems designed to check it. By 1990, federal prosecutors realized that traditional approaches wouldn't work against Gotti. Proving individual crimes was difficult, but proving a pattern of racketeering might be possible. If they could demonstrate ongoing criminal enterprise, specific acts became less important than overall structure. The surveillance tapes provided that demonstration, not because they contained smoking guns, but because they revealed systematic organization, clear hierarchy, consistent methodology, evidence of what prosecutors called a continuing criminal enterprise. Under RICO statutes, this was enough, but they needed more than tapes. They needed testimony. Someone inside who could explain what the recordings meant, someone who understood the organization intimately, someone willing to break the fundamental rule of their world. In December 1990, federal agents arranged a meeting with Gravano at the federal courthouse in Brooklyn. In a sterile conference room, they played selected recordings from the Ravenite surveillance. Not business discussions where Gotti praised Gravano, not strategy sessions where he relied on Gravano's judgment. The personal conversations where Gotti questioned Gravano's intelligence, criticized his decisions, and expressed private doubts about his loyalty. The agents watched Gravano's face as he listened to his boss systematically undermining him. They had studied his psychology, understood he valued loyalty above money, respect above power. They knew hearing Gotti's private betrayals would be more devastating than imprisonment threats. Gravano listened to 43 minutes of recordings. When they ended, he sat silent for several minutes. Finally, he asked, "Does he know you have these specific tapes?" The agents confirmed Gotti had no idea these particular conversations were recorded. He knew about surveillance, but not about the apartment above the Ravenite where personal comments were captured. Gravano nodded, understanding immediately what this meant. 3 days later, Salvatore Gravano accepted their offer. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentences. He would provide testimony and explanation for everything the surveillance had captured. The decision wasn't emotional, it was practical. Gravano had listened to his boss undermine him privately while praising him publicly. He understood that visible loyalty was different from actual loyalty, and if Gotti could betray him through words, Gravano could betray him through testimony. The trial began in January 1992. Federal prosecutors presented their case methodically, surveillance evidence, financial records, witness testimony, but the centerpiece was Gravano himself. For 19 days he explained how the Gambino family operated, who made what decisions, how money flowed, where bodies were buried, literally. Gravano admitted to participating in 19 murders. He described the planning, execution, and aftermath of each killing in clinical detail, but he also explained the reasoning, the organizational logic, the business necessity. Murder wasn't passion, it was policy. The jury listened in fascination and horror. Here was the mythology of organized crime stripped of romanticism. No honor among thieves, no sacred bonds. Just people making calculations about power, money, and survival. Gotti's defense strategy was to attack Gravano's credibility, an admitted killer seeking lighter punishment through testimony, but every allegation was supported by surveillance evidence. Every claim was corroborated by recorded conversations. The tapes made Gravano believable because they showed Gotti confirming what Gravano described. On April 2, 1992, the jury reached their verdict. Guilty on all counts. John Gotti was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. He would die in federal prison 10 years later. The visible power that had protected him for 7 years had finally created enough evidence to convict him. The Ravenite Social Club closed permanently in 1993. The building now houses a boutique clothing store. Tourists occasionally stop to take photographs. The unmarked door remains, but it opens onto retail space selling imported Italian shoes. What the FBI surveillance operation revealed wasn't criminal evidence, it was educational content, a complete course in how influence actually works when traditional barriers disappear. Gotti had understood that in the media age, power required performance, but he hadn't understood that all performances eventually end. The recordings remain classified, but former agents who heard them describe conversations about influence, loyalty, and control that would be relevant in boardrooms, political campaigns, or any environment where authority must be established and maintained without formal structure. John Gotti proved that visible power could work effectively for a while, but he also proved that systems eventually adapt to contain whatever threatens them, even when that threat operates completely in the open. The $3 million the FBI spent wasn't just an investigation budget. It was tuition for a master class in power that lasted 2 years and ended with the professor sentenced to life imprisonment. The students were federal agents. The subject was influence without invisibility. The final lesson was simple and enduring for all time ahead of us. When everyone is watching, everything becomes evidence.